Hey folks, this is Dr. Eric Fields. I'm a psychologist specializing in gambling addiction, and today's episode is focused on helping parents and partners of those afflicted with this addiction. Three essential things that you need to learn how to do are first and foremost how to take care of yourself. Self-care. If you're not able to take care of yourself, you will not be good to anyone. The second thing you're going to need to learn is all about gambling addiction. You really have to understand the functions of this addiction so that you're able to truly empathize and hear your loved one's concerns and struggles. If they don't feel understood, and if you don't convey that understanding, you will not get very far with the third set of skills, which is communication. Effective communication skills. And the type of communication skills I'm emphasizing here are those that are going to make your loved one more likely to either do what they need to do on their own to get past this addiction or to seek out help and assistance, whether that be therapy, inpatient rehab, various outpatient settings, etc., etc. Today, I am going to focus on one aspect of communication that is extremely important. And this technique comes from the solution-focused therapy orientation. Solution-focused therapy is very different from other therapeutic approaches because it doesn't focus so much on the problem. If you think about therapy in general, we're always really focused on and addressing the issues. But according to solution-focused therapy, a lot of progress can be made by building off of positive behaviors. And so that the more that this focus is on the small, incremental, positive changes in the right direction, the less the problem is going to occur. And I kind of look at this approach as pushing out or squeezing out the bad behavior, right? So that when there's so much positive behavior going on, there's not as much room for the negative behavior. There's not as much time for it. The real strength of this approach is based on what we all know in the mental health field, that preaching and lecturing and negative talk is not very inspiring in terms of getting someone to change, right? So if you're lecturing and preaching and you're just over-focused on the problem, that doesn't really motivate people very well to change. Not nearly as well as focusing on what they're actually doing well, right? Focusing on the positive behaviors. So for example, let's say your loved one usually starts engaging in this gambling behavior very early on in the weekend. You know, like let's say on Friday night, that's when they started off and their gambling bender lasts the entire weekend, right? So let's say one Friday night, they happen to not gamble, okay? And they don't start gambling till Saturday. Now, a mistake would be to focus on Saturday's gambling and say, oh my gosh, you know, I thought you were gonna, not gamble this weekend because Friday you didn't gamble, and now here you are gambling on Saturday. Just when my hopes are up, you let me down, etc., etc. That would be a major error. Okay, so according to solution focused therapy, what you should do in that situation is tell your loved one how proud of them you are because they didn't gamble on Friday night, and really focusing on that and exploring why they didn't gamble. Sometimes your loved one may poo-poo it like it was a fluke, like, oh, I don't know, I had other things going on. But don't let them do that, because if you go along with that, like, oh, it was just a fluke, they told me they were just tired, or they had something else on their mind, you're losing out on a really valuable learning opportunity for them and you. So what you really want to do in that situation is when they try to poo-poo it and say something like, I was just tired, or I had other things on my mind, or there weren't any good games on to bet on, you simply want to keep encouraging the conversation and saying things like, yeah, but I mean, really, if there's a will, there's a way. I've seen you many times on Friday when you were tired, or there might not be so many good games on, and you were still able to not gamble last night. It's really incredible. Like, can we take a look at this? Like, maybe there's a solution here. Like, maybe we're missing something that is really important to help you with this. Let's take a look at Friday night and what was really going on. And as the dialogue continues, and notice how my inflection is very positive and encouraging, and that's exactly the way you want to communicate to them. Because, their knee-jerk reaction is to just basically say, oh, it was due to external reasons or just randomness that I didn't gamble that night. And why they do that is because you have to understand that people who are addicted do not like their behavior, right? If it's a major problem for them, okay? For most people with an addiction, it is a major problem for them, and they don't like themselves very much when they do this behavior. And so that's why the negative approach at communication doesn't work well, because it's a punishing approach, and you better believe that your loved one punishes themselves enough on a daily basis. So extra punishment doesn't really do a whole lot of good. With that being said, because they are overly critical of themselves already, and already so disappointed by their behavior, they are more apt to not give themselves credit when they actually do something positive or well regarding that behavior. And so you're almost trying to break them out of that pattern of constantly being harsh on themselves. And what you're trying to do is say, hey, wait a minute, don't just kind of say that this success last night was due to other factors. I really think that had something to do with you. Maybe you were tired. Maybe there weren't so many great games on. But if you look at their past behavior, I'm sure there were many times that they were too tired, or other things were going on in their life, or too busy, or not so many great games on, and they still found a way to gamble. And that's what you want to point out to them. What was different about this night? And they might start exploring what their feelings were in that moment. Like, maybe they weren't feeling so good about that behavior, and they were getting a little sick and tired of the pattern, and they were telling themselves on some kind of deeper level that, I'm sick and tired of doing the same thing all the time. Every Friday through Sunday, I just go on a gambling bender. I just am so sick of it. I want to do something different. And so maybe that's what was going on at that time, is that they just wanted to not gamble on this Friday because they were really tired of the pattern. And so that's great. because that self-talk exemplifies a solution, right? Because the more of that kind of self-talk, the more of that, keeping the consequences in the forefront of their mind, um, really being aware of how crappy they feel, giving in and doing the same pattern every single weekend is going to be something really important to build off of. And you don't want to let this opportunity just pass them by. Now, if you're not able to get them to identify any kind of positive or effective strategy that they use, and a strategy doesn't have to be like the one I mentioned, like a mental strategy. It could be like a behavioral one. Like maybe they didn't want to do it on Friday night, and so they used another kind of strategy to distract themselves so they wouldn't think about it as much. And maybe they didn't put the two and two together, right? Like maybe when you really start questioning, you find out that they instead decided to play some sports video games online. And now other addiction therapists would say like, oh, that's bad because, that could be triggering in the future. And, I don't buy that. I think that's a bunch of crap. Whenever you can find a replacement behavior that scratches the itch a little bit or, helps you be successful in overcoming your addiction, even if just for that day or moment, I think is great. So, and that's another mistake people make, right? They'll say like, oh, he didn't gamble that night, but he was like up, until 1 a.m. playing online video games. That's not really healthy. And so, there's another missed opportunity, right? It's like, no, like he wasn't doing the really bad behavior, the behavior that gets him in so much trouble. In time, and I know I'm going off on a little tangent here, but I think it's important to point out, in time, if that becomes a compulsive behavior, sure, you want to address that. But this behavior is the most long-standing negative behavior, right? And because it's been going on for such a long time, it becomes so much more intractable and difficult to change. And so, again, you're really trying to focus in on your loved one's successful attempts at not doing the behavior. Whether or not they had a certain mindset that they were in that night that helped them refrain from the behavior, or they were doing some other behavior that helped them not do that behavior. That's what you want to focus on and build off of. And if they can't think of any reason why they didn't do it that night, then you can simply say to them, well, listen, I don't know how you did it, but I'm sure that it definitely had something to do with you. And I'm not going to kind of, say that it was just random or a fluke. I really think it had something to do with you. We might not have figured it out tonight, but that's what I believe. Because what you're conveying is, okay, maybe we won't figure out tonight or today what you did differently that day, but I have faith and belief in you, that I know it had something to do with you. And just that general reinforcement of who they are as a person, which is somebody who is capable of change, who can be resourceful, who does have it in them, for lack of a better way of saying it, to make progress with this addiction. I can't tell you how powerful that is. So this is what I really am emphasizing here. Focus on the positives. Some of you may say, I can't remember the last time my loved one didn't gamble on a certain day. Okay, so then we have to start smaller. Were they able to push off gambling an extra hour? Focus on any and all success, no matter how small, And that will gradually build momentum over time. This is Dr. Fields. I hope you found this video helpful. I'll have more to say about this at another time. Please follow me and like me. Talk to you soon.